about 26 years ago, that began the journey in earnest of what is this thing we're in called life, and where do I fit, and what am I going to contribute? Why am I here?
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Today's guest is Ronald J. Clark. He not only has an extensive background in the U.S. Army and National Guard, but he also served in the LAPD, U.S. Secret Service, and FBI. And in 2012, he founded the nonprofit Save a Warrior while earning an MBA. He and his team are pioneers in their disruptive approach in post-traumatic stress-related suicide prevention. Jake, it's an honor to have you on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thanks, Danny. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Once we learned about Save a Warrior, we just knew that we wanted to have you on the show, talk about you, and learn as much as we could about you, your background, and the amazing things that you're doing today. And so, if you don't mind, would you tell me a little bit about your background and where you grew up?
I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Came from a very small town called Mount Joy, and at a very early age, it was not an easy upbringing. A lot of dysfunction in my family, addiction, mental illness. For some reason, I had some idea that I was stuck in some story that life wasn't supposed to be this way. So I've been trying to figure some things out ever since. I'm 57 years old now. So for about the last 50 years, I've really made it my life's work to delve into understanding the beingness of human being.
Mm. And what was it that inspired you to finding your journey along service with the U.S. Army?
I was actually forced at age 17 to enlist by my father. So when I share that story, I say I was conscripted. My father, in the fall of my senior year in high school, came to me in point blank. He tried to frame it in a cheeky way, asking me when I was graduating. And I knew that the graduation date was June 6th. I was as ready to be out of high school as any young kid. And he said, great. June 7th, those bags are on the porch. You might want to call that recruiter. And the good news was my brother was already in the Army. He was about 15 months into his enlistment at that time and assured me that it wasn't that bad. But I didn't really have any aspirations. I mean, my father was a Marine during the Vietnam era. There were quite a few people in my family who had served, but I didn't really feel that called to me. So like any other kid growing up where I was from, we played Cowboys and Indians and G.I. Joes. So there was that part of me that had an adventurous spirit, but I don't know that I ever really saw myself, in the United States military, much less as deep as I would go into, where I find myself today, interacting with the community.
That's definitely a quite an eye-opening experience to graduate high school and then be literally shipped off into the Army by your father. Where did your career end up taking you?
Well, before I answer that, I'll share this, Danny. Today's July 11th. I actually shipped out 39 years ago tomorrow. And, I just want your listeners to understand, I had 7 articles at that time. I had on a pair of shoes, a pair of socks, a pair of underwear, a pair of Lee jeans, a blue t-shirt. They were Nike tennis shoes. I mowed lawns all summer to have nice tennis shoes. So I had tennis shoes, socks, underwear, a pair of Lee jeans, a t-shirt, $10 in my pocket, a toothbrush, and a driver's license. That's what I left home with on July 12th, 1984. Dad shook my hand for the first time, called me by my government nickname. He said, Ronnie, keep your mouth shut and do what they tell you. So that journey of which brings me here to you today from that point forward was 39 years ago. And a lot's happened since then.
You've definitely gone through a ton of experiences from what I was able to discover about you and preparing to meet you virtually, from the U.S. Army to the LAPD and the accolades that I listed off.
Now, my dad would tell you, Danny, that I couldn't keep a job. But yeah, that was part of the journey was in this culture, depending on our circumstances and where we come from, people that I encounter over the last 10 years, the name of the game in this culture is to look good. And for me, the best access to looking good at that time in my life was try to be the best soldier I could be. That took me a minute to figure that out. I struggled the first year. Then it was about, all right, how do I keep some level of status in my life that looks good? And because when my military career was coming to an end, I didn't have a plan. And very quickly, I figured some stuff out because I'm a bit of a hustler. And I had to be with my upbringing, like I said, which was typical in this culture, meaning it was rather dysfunctional. And typical in this culture, a lot of that dysfunction covered up because it's about looking good. But I found myself in a series of 10 years in 4 different agencies. And again and again and again, I would apply myself diligently to compete for these positions, acquire these positions. Within a few weeks, be very disillusioned with these positions. And then in the fall of 97, when I was 31 years old, I crashed my life as an FBI agent in spectacular fashion. So about 26 years ago, that began the journey in earnest of what is this thing we're in called life, and where do I fit, and what am I going to contribute? Why am I here?
It really resonates with a bit of the journey that I hear from other veterans, and to include myself, when you talk about the common upbringing of having uncommon circumstances growing up, especially within our culture. It sounds like you were really trying to find your purpose, and you were doing so through avenues that were outwardly looking good, but inwardly weren't answering the call.
Right. It was outwardly what I was really doing was surviving. And I didn't know that I was running my life with a high adverse childhood experiences survey score of a 9 on a scale of 10. I had a host of non-shareable problems and unintegrated survival traits. And I didn't know that I didn't know any of this.
And so you had mentioned in 1997, something radical changed your life?
Yeah. I was in a position at the FBI as a probationary agent where it was like, listen, it's not working out here. You obviously have some problems. You can either resign or we're going to terminate you. And, and I put myself in this position for a host of reasons. And that's for another episode. So I realized that my ability to charm my way through life by being something other than what I really was rapidly coming to a close. And I entered an extended, long, dark night of the soul from about the spring of 98 until the events of 9/11. So for about 3 years, actually close to 4 years, I had a lot of time to get into recovery and try to figure out what in God's name is wrong with me. What's wrong with me? Because there's no reason that I should not. I had this idea that I should be able to, with my upbringing, that I should have been able to manage my life well. And at this point, in like many other people out there listening, we don't intend to burn down and crash our lives. And depending on what you believe, people will say everything happens for a reason. No. Sometimes we're just stupid because there's part of us that is trying to kill something inside of us that needs to die. Unfortunately, in this community, too many people think that means the physical body. But I was getting ready to head off on what was going to become this long extended renaissance that is my life today.
So in 98, what were some of the experiences that you felt like you needed to really begin addressing, and how did you go about doing that?
It's interesting. Well, I always had off-duty gigs as a police officer. And while I was in this administrative inquiry at the FBI, a family reached out to me, and they were the benefactors to the Wrigley fortune. And this kid that they wanted me to look after, who was struggling with chemical addiction, I took him to a resort in Tucson, Arizona, a very high-end resort that had an integrative program. And I got to see my future without realizing it at the time. And, like anyone else, when we struggle in life, we have these big brains, we start to look at what we think is wrong. We think we're looking at the solution when all we're really looking at is the problem. And we're stuck in this vicious circle. And I saw a young kid at 21 with $120 million in the bank who was committed to killing himself quickly or slowly. He ended up dying at 25. And what struck me about that is, like a lot of people who come from the circumstances I did, my belief was if I just had more, better, different, then my life would work. And I realized very quickly, watching the demise of this young man, that money, property, prestige was not going to save me. That was an awakening. And again, that long, dark night of the soul for me, what started to bring me out of that were the events of 9/11, because that's when I found myself back in the reserves and with a renewed vigor to go at life again, not realizing that I was still chasing some degree of status in some form. But that was a index event that kind of woke me up, put me back in the reserves. Now, the difference was, by this point, I got 4 years in the rooms of recovery, then in the word anonymous. So the differentiator was I was able to walk into a world that most people that join the military will not go into because it doesn't look good. Our pride will not let us go in these rooms. So the one thing about me on this show is I will shoot you straight, because I put 2,200 people through this thing called Save a Warrior, and we bring you here for about 3 days. We're going to help you. So that's what I created at Save a Warrior.
It's really funny as you're sitting here talking and sharing the experiences. I'm just sitting here thinking about the idea of everywhere we go, there we are. So no matter what our outward circumstances are, they're never going to be good enough to fix the distortion that's in our own minds. And we develop this distortion because we either never learned it right, or we intentionally learned it the wrong way to suit our needs, whether it was a mode of survival or whether it was out of sheer desire for just more. And so, when you're going from job to job or facing these mental health issues that drive us towards wanting to end our own lives, it's easy for somebody on the outside looking at us going, if I could have a conversation with that individual that is clearly floundering, that needs some guidance, I can tell them what is wrong. However, our minds won't let us actually acknowledge that things are wrong because we're alive. Our food, our bellies have food. We have the things that we feel like we need to survive, until it gets to that utter breaking point where we finally end up in a room, like you mentioned, that ends with anonymous, or a facility out in Tucson, Arizona. And so, when you're out working with the veteran community, and starting to see these people during your time in service, what's your initial reaction when you encounter somebody that is clearly floundering but not yet ready to admit it?
It reinforces the only two things that I know that are true. Human beings don't listen, and human beings don't answer questions. And we don't look at the world through our own eyes. We look at the world through the sets of eyes of people who have had the greatest emotional influences. For most of us growing up, it's our mother and our father. There's an old saying I like: most men spend the last 80 years of their life trying to get over the first 5, because so much is going on chemically inside of our brain. 85% of our brain forms in the first 4 years of life, and it takes another 22 years till we're 26 for the brain to complete forming. So we're looking at the world through the eyes of someone else, and we don't know that we don't know this, and we have these opinions and we have these ideas, none of which are true. And we live in a non-reality where we feel that we're lacking, we're not enough, there's not enough. It's contextualized in this thing called shame, which is our fear of being disconnected. So I'm constantly trying to reprocess reality that is not reality. And I feel that the world is against me. Nobody understands me. I'm not going to get what I want. I'm going to lose what I have. Hundreds of other forms of self-centered fear. And what I failed to realize is that the true reason I was sent here was to contribute. And that's the last thing we figure out, because whatever created us was really, really smart, because it put that wisdom, Danny, the last place we would ever think to look for that, and that's inside of us. It hit it exactly the last place we would ever think to look for where the solution is. And the interesting thing is we come into this manifestation of life with batteries included. Everything we need is already inside of us. And it probably took me till I was about 51 years old. Marriage fell apart. Once again, all these years into recovery, how could I make these same mistakes? How could I repeat this behavior? How could I? Because I wasn't working with others the way I was taught to work with others in the rooms of recovery. Here's what I can tell you. When you have your life organized primarily as contribution, 51% of your life is contributing to the spiritual growth of another, your life just sorts itself out. Now, unfortunately, you got to crash your life to get that. You're not just going to wake up tomorrow, look in the mirror, brush your teeth, stand close to the toothbrush, shave, and you go, you know what? I'm going to change today. I'm going to change everything about my life today. It doesn't work like that. I have this dream too, this aspiration. I want to be the white Dave Goggins and just yell and scream at people and go, who's going to carry the boats? Who's going to carry the books? This is something that is endemic to our community. Why? Because the average adverse childhood experiences survey score at SAW is a 7, the same as a convicted felon in the United States penitentiary system. The problem is centered in my thinking, actually in my non-thinking. So we do need 72 hours to have this conversation, to have this evidence-based intervention with a participant where they understand very clearly, Danny, at the beginning, this is not going to go your way. This is not going to go your way. And it's not what you think. And believe me, I've had to have the same kind of initiation myself. Why? Because we're hard-headed. Meanwhile, our life doesn't work. Drink too much, smoke too much, sleep too much, don't work out enough, don't eat the right kinds of food. And our life just spirals down and down and down. And this is exactly what is supposed to happen to people stuck in a vicious circle. It is actually the universe calling us to this adventure called our life. And that's what our work is contextualized in that heroic journey that all of us were looking for. We thought we were going to find it in the military. We thought we were going to find it in that relationship. We thought we were going to find it in that job, in that opportunity. And again and again and again, we end up being, like you said, wherever we go, there we are. So this is about transforming everything about the quality of one's life.
You mentioned 25 years in the rooms of recovery have taught you one simple truth. Living a life of contribution is the way that we can live our lives fully. And it seems that in your later years, roughly 10 years ago, you actually started living that out on a daily basis by founding Save a Warrior.
That's true. That's true. But I had the wrong motives at first. I wanted to solve the problem. I wanted credit for solving the problem. I didn't get my motives sorted out, Danny, till about 5.5 years ago when I was going through a divorce. And as we were splitting up, my ex is like, you don't even know who you are. And she's very successful. And she said, who are you? And what are you really about? And why are you doing this? It works to that effect. I believe me, I was much more self-reflective than she gave me credit for. And, we're friends to this day. And, it's interesting, but I had to really get crushed because I didn't get married till I was 49. And I figured, if I waited till I met the right person and was in the right circumstances, I had about 13 years of sobriety at that time, 18 years in the rooms of recovery, both for chemical and process stuff. But I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't realize the problem was really complex PTSD. It wasn't sex addiction. It wasn't alcoholism. It wasn't this, that, or the other. It was formative trauma with moral injury, collapsed on top of it, a vicious circle in a vicious circle. And I had to find a way to integrate these survival traits that was no longer serving me. If anybody's listening and they're wondering like, what's wrong with me? You probably have a very high adverse childhood experiences survey score. And you have unintegrated survival traits. This is a very simple problem. The solution is what's difficult. Doing the work to integrate the unintegrated survival traits is unbelievably difficult. And once I can accept that, now I can surrender and submit. But this is a precede, proceed model. I got to come back to the original crime scene. I got to be with that with which I cannot be. I've got to mourn and grieve the past. I got to quit telling that same story that people are tired of hearing. And I got to learn to tell a new story. And that's what we help people do at Save a Warrior. We help them see the world through a different set of lenses that has not occurred to them as possibility.
So how do you go about doing that? Because this story that we tell ourselves, these prisons that we lock ourselves in from childhood, once I graduate school, I'll be free of this circumstance. Once I get out of the military, once I get out of college, then I'll really be able to do this. And we develop this belief that where we're at is what's holding us back from accomplishing what we're supposed to accomplish. And it continues that cycle. So we step into the next bad relationship. If I married the right woman, if I bought the right house, if I live in the right place, if I own the right clothes. So what does Save a Warrior do to help break that mindset and get through to people? Because 72 hours to change a life is a very limited amount of time.
Oh, it's a miracle, dude. It takes a moment, right? It takes a moment, but we start with this idea of submission. We start with this idea of, I can't do this anymore. And a person's pride gives way just enough for a hint of possibility of, I need help, like real help. And then you move to enrollment, which is creating possibilities for someone such that they are touched, moved, and inspired by what's possible for themselves or others. And it begins with that, enrolling people in the possibility of possibility. And then you ask a question. Listen, are you done suffering? That's the most powerful question you can ever ask another person with whom you care about. Are you done suffering? And if they say, I'm open to the possibility of being done suffering, because if I'm done suffering, I've got to give up every story that I have attached to the suffering that has been the circumstances of the parts of my life that I'm not happy with. Then it's about containment. Am I willing to go in? Because all transformation occurs in the cocoon. Am I willing to enter into a context where I don't have any say, or nothing's going to go my way for a period of time? In this intervention, it's 72 hours. And am I willing to enact? So you need three things for a proper initiation. You need submission, containment, and enactment. The things that happen that are going to allow me to precede before I proceed, because we're going to bring you all the way back to where the road went left and the road went right. And we went down this other path that obviously I'm going to keep seeing. This is the vicious circle. So that's how we do it. We bring you back, and we very, very quickly, and I mean very quickly, from the outset of this experience, because there's a game clock counting down from 72 hours to absolute zero. And by the time that clock hits absolute zero, in this nonlinear, accelerated place of non-ordinary states of consciousness, this game is so specifically designed for that participant's way of being and what's going on for them internally. If I could illustrate to you sufficiently what happens in those 72 hours, I'd have a line out the door of 1 million people. Now, we have about 1,000 people apply to the program every year. We can support about half of them, and those are the ones that are absolutely ready to be done suffering. But you got to get, Danny, everybody coming to Save a Warrior is an addict. They're either a chemical addict, they're a process addict, or both. Many of them know that and go through our sponsorship program before, but the process addictions take a little bit longer to integrate the survival traits attendant to those. So we have a 500-day follow-on plan that most people, it's going to take them 1,000, 1,500 days to complete, because it's a grind. It's brutal. You got to look. It's like somebody holding a mirror up to you, and you're like, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at my smallness. I don't want to look at my selfishness. I don't want to look at my self-centeredness. I don't want to look at my self-seeking. But when I can confront these parts of myself, these defects of character, I begin to see my humanity and my shared I begin to engage in the shared honesty of mutual vulnerability, openly acknowledged with other people on that path. And I figure out the most important thing of my life, and that's the where. Simon Sinek, who wrote a beautiful book, Start With Why, talks about the golden circle. Figure out your why. That'll lead you to the how and beget the what. That's great for normal people. We're not normal people. I got to figure out my where. Start with where. When you put yourself in a position to be around safe people that are fellow traveling that journey with you, life begins to shift very, very rapidly. And the shame begins to fall away, and the dishonesty begins to fall away, and the I'm not enoughness begins to fall away, and the there's not enoughness begins to fall away. But the thing about this journey that we caveat and we admonish people, if you're coming into this community of practice or any community of practice that is, designed to offer you spiritual solutions for spiritual problems, because most people are seeking material solutions for spiritual problems and it doesn't work. The only thing we have to change about our life is everything. That's a lifelong endeavor. There's still these things that I struggle to change about myself. But the good news is, see, I'm a beggar, right? I beg for money. And I can tell the truth because I don't work for anyone. I work for the benevolence of society. So until society stops giving me money, no, I'll just keep having the same conversation on podcasts with people. Because it wasn't until somebody said to me when I was 32 years old, you look great, but your life doesn't work. That was devastating. How does my life work today? I don't have any illusions. I'm a beggar with a story to tell. So I go out and share with people, look, this is why your life doesn't work. Here's the truth. And it's brutal. It's bitter. It tastes awful. But I was blessed enough to have about a handful of men in my life over the last 30 years grab me by the collar and go, hey, idiot, this thing called life, this is going to end one day. Do you want to go out screaming, or you want to die with some peace knowing that you made a contribution here, that you made a dent in the world? That's what happens at Save a Warrior. We teach you how to get a good seal on your mask so that you can go out and make the dent in the world and live a purpose-driven life that you were actually sent here to live.
And that's a beautiful sentiment. I know I was 27 when I received a very similar message to you. I was too young to receive that message. That my best thinking got me here is what I was told. It wasn't your life is going to hell. It was I knew that my life was going to hell because I was suicidal at that time. I was told that I had PTSD and that I was losing my job because of it. That they were going to medically separate me, and I became suicidal. And when I showed up to a facility, they began just telling me, you need to learn how to listen to somebody because your best thinking got you here. And I just really had to take account of what that circumstance was, because I was amongst a bunch of drug addicts and alcoholics and people that I could look at and go, yeah, their lives are really heading towards a negative place. My life was really good, but I was in the same place as them. And a lot of us are in the same places as people that we would see as having an undesirable life. And so knowing that we're all kind of in the same place in life, and that one of the easiest solutions is to take the advice of others and start living by the example of others, was really amazing to learn at such a young age, because now I can sit here and have a conversation with you and go, well, how'd you get there? How did you get to found a nonprofit that is helping hundreds of people every year with a follow-on program? And I'm really glad that you said that we have a 500-day follow-on program. So what have you seen as one of the success stories that comes out of Save a Warrior? Would you be able to share any of that?
Yes, and thank you for asking that. I've seen people reach for their courage, which we define courage as the capacity to tell one's story of who they are with their whole heart, and surrender. Give up this story, give up these resentments, give up the drama, and really begin to take steps to remake the entirety of their life. And we're very straightforward with people. We're like, listen, for every decade you've been alive, you're looking at about a year of work. So if you're 40 years old coming into this experience, if you spend 40 to 60 minutes a day using our meditation, engaging in the 500-day plan, supporting others going through the 500-day plan, I promise you, in 4 to 5 years, your life will be unrecognizable. We live in a culture, Danny, where instant gratification is no longer fast enough. And I'm like, listen, this is it. Like, you're going to have to grind for about 4 to 5 years for about 40 to 60 minutes every day. You got to make your bed. You're going to have to pray or affirm, meditate, sit down with this material, look at these things, get this stuff down on paper. You're going to have to stop drinking and drugging. You got to be honest about your dishonesty, open and willing. That's the how of the how. I got to be honest, open, and willing about the things I'm dishonest, not open, and unwilling to be willing about. And then all of a sudden, who I'm being internally is going to begin to transform. That can happen very quickly. What is difficult and takes time is getting the reps in, and we learn to begin to accept doing things we don't want to do, not because an institution that's going to punish me if I don't, but because these are the instrumentalities of good self-care. It's contrary action, because my way doesn't work. Like you said, when people show up at SALT, they want to have a say in the matter. And I believe in design thinking. My doctoral work is in design thinking. What is, what if, what wows, what works. But not during the intervention. During the 500-day plan, you have all the say in the world. You can take track A, you can take track B. We can help with you design track C, because it's about information intensive, user designed. People are put together in such a way that they respond more rigorously if they're involved with the say-so of their treatment protocols. But when you're being intervened on, that's the universe throwing you a bone going, hey, player, you're about ready to drive this thing over the cliff. Most people go over the cliff. Those of us that are fortunate enough to crash and burn and then not complete suicide, we tend to be able to find people who have been where we've been and who tell us the same thing again and again and again. Listen, the only thing you have to change about yourself, your life is everything. That is a daunting undertaking, even for somebody with the discipline coming from a military background. But again, if you look at the discipline we come from, if we're being honest with ourselves, it's so that we didn't get in trouble. We paid attention because we resent and fear authority. We're people pleasers and approval seekers. Our relationships don't work. They're codependent. The problem is we're dependent person. These are the people I see. Now, if there's normal people out there just trying to pass the time because you and I are a couple of handsome devils and they love the sound of our voice, great. But for the people that are out there that this is landing for, that are saying, you know what, that guy's describing my life. I'm bereft of hope. I keep throwing my past into the future. I keep seeing the same thing over and over again. These are the people that we're trying to reach and connect and say, yes, we can support you. And it's going to be the most difficult, brutally beautiful thing you're ever going to go through in your life. And you don't have to do it alone. As a matter of fact, you can't do it alone. You don't. Transformation occurs in the cocoon, but recovery and integration always happens in community. And the word communion comes from an act or instance of sharing. And our hook is this. Everybody wants to know, what's the hook? Our hook is there's no hook. We can't get ours until you get yours. So we got to ensure that we give you the highest quality intervention and follow-on support that we're capable of furnishing to you. And we never transact with people. We don't charge for our services. We beg up all this money privately. We're very fortunate to have this incredible relationship with disabled American veterans, our donor list, some corporations, what have you, so that we're able to fund operations. There's a lot of great ideas out there, Danny. They just can't raise the money to do it, because there's competition for those donor dollars. So right now we're good. We're building our endowment, and if you're out there listening and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you're done suffering, we may have something for you.
Yeah, and for those that are looking for a change, recognizing that nothing changes unless everything changes, and for those individuals, where can they find out more information about Save a Warrior and how to go about connecting with you and your team?
You can go to saveawarrior.org. We just went through, updated all of the language at the website and go to the apply page and hit submit. And you will be contacted in very short order by one of the members of our rostering team. And here's the great news. Anybody that works at Save a Warrior has been through the experience and has completed the 500-day plan. And they'll share, if the person is open to hearing, a little bit about their own transformational journey and, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And the people on the other end of the phone tend to be very touched, moved, and inspired by what they hear. And, it's a very, very powerful first live connection to us to see, if that person is ready to go through the process. So that's at saveawarrior.org. And if you're struggling with chemical addiction, we have a sponsorship program where alumni of our community who are in programs that end in anonymous will take you through the 12 steps very, very quickly, so we can get what's called dry wood to get you in the seat that much sooner.
That's incredible. And thank you for the services that you're doing. Now, back to you. 25 years of recovery is no small feat. And for those that have never been around what successful long-term recovery looks like, it's one of the most beautiful things. And we learn so much as we continue to look for ways to continue to grow, because we recognize that sitting still will only start to deteriorate our bodies, our minds, and our souls. So I'd love to ask you just a few rapid fire questions about your daily activities on how you care for yourself if you have the time.
Danny, I got nothing but time for you, brother. We're on a mission from God today. We're looking to maybe save somebody's life. I got nothing but time for you, brother.
I love it. Well, these go over our 5 pillars of health: the physical, spiritual, mental, relational, and professional pillars that really encompass the whole body. And so for the first one, how do you go about taking care of your physical health and well-being today?
I get plenty of sleep. I row about 24 miles a week, about 38,000 meters. I started about a year ago getting back in shape in earnest. I pray, I meditate, I eat once a day. I fast for 23 hours every day. I start eating at about 6 o'clock, and I have about a window. I have a meal, and then after I'm done rowing, I'll make a protein shake to get some stuff back in, get some electrolytes back in my body. That's how I take care of my physical well-being. And I cold plunge. I take cold showers every day, and I cold plunge every other day.
Awesome. And then it sounds like meditation is a big component in your life. How do you also go about maintaining a positive mindset?
For any positivity, for me, it's the next cohort. It's the next Save a Warrior cohort. It's the next growth for the organization. I look to positive people in my life to be inspired. I'm surrounded by positive people. I don't know why they give me the time of day, but I'm more about just do it. Contrary action, take contrary action. What I'm positive about is that we have a solution for people that's very, very effective and can transform the quality of their life. I'm positive that the research that we have looked into and all the different modalities to create this integrative experience, this multidisciplinary approach, I'm positive that if somebody comes in here and they're done suffering, that we're going to make a tremendous impact into the quality of their life. And it's only going to take them being done suffering.
Incredible. How do you go about maintaining healthy relationships in your life in order to continue to contribute to others?
I'm accountable for who I am and who I'm being. And I have very good men in my life that have my permission when they see me doing things that I shouldn't be doing or not doing things that I should be doing. They have ongoing permission to call that out. And they do so compassionately, but they do so rigorously. So having those kinds of connections in my life makes me a very, very wealthy man. I am blessed to be in relationship with some of the most incredible human beings that I have the privilege of spending time with on a daily basis.
What's been the most influential tool or tip that has helped you in your professional career?
The work of Werner Erhard, Erhard, the work of Bill Wilson, the work of Joe Dispenza, the work of M. Scott Peck. The greatest book I've ever read as a business leader is The Three Laws of Performance by Steve Zaffron and Paul Logan. And I would say the ability to put one foot in front of the other on a daily basis and keep my head in the day that I'm living, like just doing Tuesday. And the rest of life will begin to take care of itself, but just be in the day that I'm in.
This is some great research to check out. And then how would you define your purpose during this season of life?
My purpose is to continue to see that the Saul Endowment Foundation gets to its goal of being fully funded so that when my time is done here in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm able to hand it all to the next generation of professionals running Save a Warrior. And the last thing that they're worried about is funding. Beyond that, my purpose on a daily basis is to work with the two handfuls of men that are themselves engaged in their recovery and their own 500-day plan, and to be available for them 24/7 to share with them my experience, strength, and hope that was freely given to me. My purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service to a higher power and to serve the people closest to me.
And final question, Jake, what would you say to somebody that is currently struggling?
You're not alone. I know you've heard that. You're never alone. In your darkest hour, you are source. You are connected to source. Source will never abandon you. Whatever it is that brought you here didn't make a mistake. What's going on for you internally is not who you are. There are people that care whether or not you live or die. You're worthy because you breathe, but you are not going through this struggle alone. There are people rooting for you that you haven't met yet, that will welcome you, that will invite you. They will hold you to a standard of excellence that they know you're capable of in your own journey to wellness. But the key is the hardest part, whatever you're doing, is stopping. The hardest thing you have to do is stop. And we can help you stop and walk this thing back and begin to get into the practice of getting your life back.
Jake, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And thank you for the work that you're doing with Save a Warrior. I appreciate you coming on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
I appreciate you, Danny. Thank you for the platform and for what you're doing to make a difference in the lives of people.